Good afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Oops. Okay, again, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Today's session is about remote small group instructions, and my name is Zainab Haydous, and I am an English learner consultant at Wayne Risa. I have my colleagues who are also presenting with me, Kaylin Willaten and Michelle Wagner.
Good afternoon. I'm also an English learner consultant. And Michelle?
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Wagner. I'm a literacy consultant at Wayne Risa. So it's good to be with you all today.
Yes, thank you all for being here with us. On our agenda for today, we're going to begin by having a community builder just to get to know who's in the room. And then we're going to be quickly talking about why small group instruction is important and different makeups for small groups that you can have in your classroom and how we can make learning accessible for all students, including multilingual learners. Then we will have a little activity towards the end, which you will take part in a breakout room with a group of colleagues, and we'll have a share out after that before we resume for today. So to begin today, we would like to really emphasize the importance of building a community and learning about each other. So our first activity, which is a connector activity, is called Picture Connections. And what you're going to do is you're going with your group to look at different pictures that are on each slide. On your slide, so if you're in group number 1, you're going to look on the first slide, and you're going to pick a picture from that slide that reflects your goals for creating small groups in your classroom, and then have a discussion and take turns, talking about it within your group. Make sure you begin by having a little elevator speech to introduce yourself to your groups. And in the chat box, you will find the form that will take you to the slide deck with all of the pictures. So make sure you click on that. Thank you, Kelly, for sharing that. Make sure you click on that before you are sent to the breakout rooms, and Michelle will take us right into these rooms.
Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back. We hope you had enough time. I know a lot of times the time that you are given in a breakout room goes by really, really fast. So we hope you had some time to get to know the people in your group and share some of your ideas with them. And now we're going to move forward with Michelle.
So the first thing we'd like to do is just give you the opportunity to rename yourself. And this is going to help us as we engage in groups later on in the session. We just want to make sure that we're putting you in the group that makes the most sense for your current position. So if you would like to be placed in a group with other elementary people, please put an E in front of your name. If you would prefer to be with the middle school group, put an M in front of your name and an H in front of your name if you happen to be high school. That'll just help us make sure that you have rich conversation and that you find yourself with people who you'd like to engage in conversation with. This is also a great technique for labeling students as we're putting them in groups. So if they have certain interests, so for example, if we were discussing sharks or whales, you could have students put an S or a W depending on which group they would like to be in. Everything we do in literacy is really rooted in research and those best practices that we know impact student achievement. So at Wayne Risa, we lean heavily into the literacy essentials. These are essential instructional practices in literacy that range from birth all the way up till high school ends. So we encourage you to check these out. They are all freely available to you. And there are 10 essentials for each age group And they really walk you through what high quality literacy instruction would look like at each grade level. It's always nice to remember that these are not just great ideas from great teachers, but they're actually research based. So hopefully as you're going through these, you'll find a lot of those pieces that you know to work well in your own classroom, but then also those areas that you might want to beef up just a little bit. When we think about these literacy essentials, we just want to keep in mind that we're trying to give every child in every classroom every day access to high quality literacy instruction. And that these standards should really be viewed as a minimum standard of care that we're offering to every child. And then we also want to think of this as that tier one, that bottom layer, that core piece of instruction that's offered to every child. As I said, there are 10 for each grade level. So if you're a K-3 educator, I highly encourage you to access that K-3 document. But remember that you may need to pull from the pre-K document if you have students who might be coming to you with a few deficiencies or just a bit below grade level. Today, we're really focusing on grades K-3 and that idea of small group individual instruction. So this idea of really meeting students' needs in small groups. We know that this is an important way to meet student needs, and especially as we're engaged in remote instruction, this is where we can have a lot of power and make a big difference in the lives of our students because it gives us that opportunity to meet in small groups and really see what our students are able to do and tweak our instruction based on those needs. Give you just a moment to read the actual instructional practice. Okay. And then the one thing I do want to leave you with is this idea of it being that there's power and choice and making sure that we're spending the most of our time on actually giving students real opportunities to read and write, but also even within those groups, giving students the opportunity to make the choices that they need to make so that they feel like they're in charge of their learning experience. It's so important. And whether you're using Microsoft Teams and engaging in breakout rooms to lead these small groups, or you're using something like Zoom, you can also do this in Google Meet, just in small groups where you're scheduling separate meetings. But these are two great tools, and those breakout rooms really do make it possible to meet with small groups and really have children engage in deep dialogue. So, with that, just remember how important that choice is and in all that we do. With that, I'm going to throw it over to my colleague. And I'm going to give you just a moment in the chat, if you wouldn't mind sharing one or two ideas that you're hoping to gain from today's session. So something that maybe you came today hoping to receive, and we will do our best.
Awesome. There are a lot of great ideas in there. All right. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the SIOP model, which is the sheltered instruction, interaction is actually one of the components of the SIOP model. And in that component, it really, the features that are in the interaction component stress about the importance of grouping configurations that support language as well as content when it comes to having small group instruction. So that is one area that we really try to focus on when it comes to small group instruction, is really providing students with opportunities to practice the language as well as the content when it comes to that small group instruction. Next, Galen. Thank you. So how do we really determine the roles for interaction? We're going to share a few different ideas with you. One of the ideas that is, a great way to have students look at is the Freyer model. And one of with the Freyer model, the vocabulary word is placed in the middle. And then students write the definition in their own words or using a dictionary in one of the areas. And then a traditional Freyer model uses characteristics, examples, and non-examples to increase the understanding of the word, but you can adapt the categories in each corner for different content areas and grade levels. Students could draw a picture, use the word in a sentence, or whatever you feel is appropriate. And what we love most about this specific one is we do have it in an electronic copy. So now, especially in a virtual setting, you as a teacher can go in and you can make edits to the template by selecting which categories you would like in those 4 different corners and sharing it on a slide deck with your students. And then they can, they can see how the rest of the class is working on it and assign different words, same words, or however you see it can fit. Another great activity that we thought about is, especially when it comes to small group, a lot of the times when you have students work in small groups, it ends up being, the one student that does most of the work. And when it comes to multilingual learners and all learners, we want to make sure that all of the students that are in the group are collaborating and putting their input so that they are taking part in the learning. And with this specific activity, we call it the collaborative plot diagram. And in this one, each student is labeled by a color. So, and you can really have the flexibility of selecting which students are which color, depending on, their ability. And they can then collaborate on creating this document or this activity as a group. So if you are in the yellow, if you're the team member that is in charge of the yellow boxes, you are working on having to find out who the antagonist is, and then the setting of the story, for example. And then an extension to this activity is also the plot diagram. So the first part was the, little bit of information about the story. And then here is really the plot of the story, and same thing. And a lot of the times, you can help students by scaffolding this and including some sentence stems, or maybe giving them the opportunity to draw pictures to represent their thinking. And these resources will be shared with you in the chat box and at the end of this presentation as well.
Strategy that we like to use with multilingual learners that I would argue is really good for all of your learners is called the QSSA or the QSSA. It's a way of having structured conversations and structured talk in the classroom. It can be used effectively across content areas and grade levels. And it is especially effective for English learners or your multilingual learners because it engages the entire class. So the way that the QSSA is or begins, it begins with an open-ended question. So you would state something to your class such as, well, think about this question. And when you're asking this question, you really want to use rich vocabulary. It's great if you can keep it posted, within their field of vision in some shape or form for them to think about. And this question is going to be linked to any objectives and lesson goals that you have. And the purpose of it is to focus and activate prior knowledge for your multilingual learners and all students before they begin. Then the next two parts are STEM and signal, which I sometimes see reverse signal and STEM. It doesn't really matter because the focus here is preparation for the students and what they're going to do. So with the STEM, you're providing them with STEMs that are going to get them to practice the targeted academic language you want them to use. And you can begin by saying something like, as you discuss your answers, I want you to respond in this format, and then go over the sentence stems that you expect them to use. The signal piece, the purpose is to build in wait time for everyone to process, especially multilingual learners or other students who need more processing time. So your signal can be anything. When you are actually back in the classroom, if you are face-to-face or hybrid, it can be standing up, it can be giving a thumbs up, it could be holding up an object or a piece of paper or something like that. While you're virtual, it can be little icons like, putting a smiley face in the chat or on your face, those little reaction things. It kind of depends on what you're using, but Google Meet and Microsoft Teams and Zoom all have those capabilities. So that signal is like, when you think you have an answer in mind, let me know by, and then that would be your agreed upon signal. Then sharing is usually done in pairs, but you could also do it in small groups. And the purpose of having them share ahead of time is it increases student talk. It gives them a chance to compare their answers. And you have the entire class practicing the targeted language that you want them to use. And again, even though not all students are multilingual learners, all students are academic language learners. So again, whatever language you're trying to focus on is good when it's practiced by all of them. And then the assess piece. So then you can select students to share. That's also an opportunity to, besides checking for understanding, to also clear up misconceptions if there are any. And the good part about this is with all the previous scaffolds for English learners, that ensures that really they and all of your students are prepared to respond because of all the practice time they've got in there. So when you are talking about multilingual learners, please, when you look at this, when you see all that high and mid-low and that, I don't want you to run from here saying, Kaylin from RESA told me to ability group. That's not what's going on here. So what this is about is mainly about English language proficiency level and allowing someone the opportunity to speak by having enough comprehensible input and enough preparation beforehand to enable them to speak and share their ideas. So in this way, it is often good to have a higher level student, modeling language for a lower level student. However, you don't want your highest students generally with the lowest students. It's just, it's more stressful for both parties. And it's much better if you kind of have less of a gap between their language levels. So in this strategy to create the student pairs for structured talk, you would kind of put your kids in roughly equal quadrants, right? So A1 would be high, especially higher English language proficiency students, A2 mid-high, B1 mid-low, and B2 low. Now, don't even, if you have little numbers in there, you can ignore the numbering within the quadrant, and then you start pairing up between quadrants. But the biggest thing, again, I want you to notice is it's high with mid-low and mid-high with low. We want that gap not to be so large between the levels. Now, there's a bunch of other things, though, to take into consideration that are going to transcend these quadrants, right? Sometimes content ability. One of my favorite things would be to have a low-level English language proficiency student, but maybe we were working, on fractions, and I knew they were really good at fractions, and pairing them with a high-level English language proficiency student, but maybe it was someone, who did have more issues in math, and working together, they could actually support each other quite well. Other things to take into account are students with disabilities, student personalities, of course, and then same language peers who could provide native language support to your students. Now, coming back here to this idea of we don't always want homogeneous groupings by any means, is working with a small group on higher order thinking, but with lower level text. When you're doing something with direct instruction, like these examples here are all about analyzing text structure in expository text. What I used to say to students as I grouped them together is the text is easy because the thinking is hard. So I didn't really care if you were reading like really, really high. If we're going to really work on something, we might all start with a book that has 4 to 6 sentences on a page. Because by the time you delve into these text structures, we would often find, like if you look at that falling domino, that cause and effect, sometimes there are things that they have to inference within a page that the writer has implied but not clearly stated. Maybe they're talking about cause and effect, but as you know, they don't start with the cause and then go to each effect naturally, like in a linear motion. It might be kind of all over the place, and you have to determine which event is causing the next one to happen. So by the time we got through all that thinking and writing, we often found that we wrote more on our, on our graphic organizer than the writer had written in the book. After that, of course, if you want a student to do that with, an independent level text or an instructional level text, you can. But again, generally speaking, when we have high cognitive demand, we want a lower language demand. And if we're really trying to learn something about language, often we need a little lower cognitive demand until they get the language. So always playing with that is really good. Other ways to do this are things like information circles, which are like literature circles, but choosing topics, grouping students around topics that they're interested in for expository text, and doing things like layering multimodal texts. Dr. Goldie Muhammad has done a lot of work with this, where you can have maps and photos and videos and podcasts and all sorts of things that are around a main text to kind of bring it out. Okay, so this is something else that I'm dropping in the chat for you. By the way, all of these resources are going to be sent to you. They are also on the last slide in this presentation, and I have put the presentation link in the chat as well. So you're going to getting them separately in the chat. So there's a lot of ways to access these resources that, if you are interested, will ask you to make their own copy when you click on the link. So these are stations in hybrid learning. They're very good. And again, thinking of how often we have to concentrate on literacy, not what we should be in secondary too, but that's a soapbox for another day. But as all of you here I see are interested in elementary, this one has the teacher-led group being a reading group, which is often what happens, as we know. And then thinking about the asynchronous stations in the other three domains, listening, speaking, and writing. So that's one way to do it. And this is a slide deck that has a lot of different possibilities for grouping that you might find interesting to look at. Next, before we give you a little time to explore those resources and talk to each other in another breakout room, I would like to do a shout out to our ELA and literacy people, like Michelle at Wayne Risa, who have created a wonderful page with the Literacy Network. It's called PD Minute. And I'm sorry, let me drop that in the chat as well right now. And that is about, each video is maximum 3 minutes, and most are quite a bit under. And these are all just like quick PD minutes. They are to start conversations or pique your interest. They can be shared with people in your district, your grade level team, other people in your subject area. And they're just really, really good. And we are going to continue to add to them. And Zainab and I like this idea so much, we'd like to add there and maybe even create our own little quick PD minutes for working with multilingual learners. So before we go on, oh, sorry, shout out, I also added our EL multilingual family resources in the Padlet there as well. That has a lot of things for educators as well. So to our breakout rooms. So we're going to go to breakout rooms in just a moment, and you're going to get 20 minutes there. And I want you to think, we've just given you a lot of possibilities and information from strategies such as structured conversations with QASA, for things like the collaborative plot diagram, or also the Frayer, the group Frayer, these different ways to collaborate on Google slide decks. We've given you some links to other resources as well. We're going to have you go and think about your grouping configurations and interaction and student interaction. And you're going to have a part that's going to be, what are you currently doing? And also what you might try. Now, one of the things, let me slide over here. Where's my Jamboard? If you haven't used a Jamboard before, these are wonderful. If you have a Google account, these just come free. And you can set up lovely slides like this. And there's a lot of things you can do, like including adding images and stuff, which we're not going to do today. But when you want someone just to write, like you can do either a text box, right? Or you can do a sticky note and you can change the color, do whatever you want, right? And when you do that, then you can move things around, you can make them larger or smaller, you can edit them or delete them and all that sort of thing. So once Michelle, your rooms, What you're going to do is up here, when you're going to end up here, and you're going to have slides, and depending on the breakout room number, you're going to find your slide. So you just click the arrow here. So if you're breakout 3, you're just going to go to slide 3. And I'm sorry, I often do write the number on the slide, but I neglected to do that this time. So just match your breakout room number with the little number that will be up here. And if you do choose to use this with your students, it's nice because as they work, you can move around and you can see what they're doing. And if you see that one group, isn't putting anything out there, then that's the first breakout room you can visit to see if they have problems. Right? Oh, I did not hit. Yes, I'm sorry. If you are with Microsoft Teams, you can absolutely use PowerPoint in a similar fashion. Thank you so much, Michelle, for saying that. I am sorry for the Google orientation. So in just a moment, Michelle will get you into breakout rooms and you can talk to your group about that.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and open up those rooms. And before I do that, I just want you to kind of notice as you go to those breakout rooms that they all have unique names. Each room has been named after an African American author, and I did that in honor of African American History Month. But I just highly encourage you to think about just renaming your groups in ways that would pique interest or maybe relate to a different area of curriculum, just as a fun way. Here we go.